The Texas sun hammered the earth without mercy, its molten glare pressing down on the dust-caked outpost of Fort Bryer. The summer heat shimmered like liquid above the cracked ground, and not even the flies seemed to have the strength to buzz. In the center of the yard, enclosed by rough-hewn timber slats, a small Comanche girl crouched low, no more than 12, her body coiled tight like a wolf pup ready to spring. Her hands were bound in rawhide at the wrists, the skin beneath red and blistered. Sweat streaked her dirt-smudged face, and blood, dried and rust-brown, clung to the corner of her mouth. Around her, soldiers loitered in the shade, rifles slung lazily over their shoulders, but their eyes stayed sharp on the girl in the pen. "That one's feral," muttered a soldier, leaning on his boot heel, his lip curled in disgust. "Killed a grown man with a stick. Should have left her out there to starve." Another spat tobacco into the dust. "Savages ain't born like that. They're made. War makes 'em. Hunger makes 'em." "She's a demon child," someone whispered, watching the way the girl's sharp gaze flicked between them, reading their movements like a cornered animal. But not all faces were filled with contempt. Lily Cartwright, slim, pale, and barely 14, stood apart from the crowd, her bonnet tugged low, shielding her from the sun, her hands clenched around a worn leather book. Something in the girl's fierce, unblinking stare rooted Lily to the spot. The world quieted around them. The feral child glared at her, and Lily did not look away. Lily Cartwright had grown up on the frayed edge of the frontier, where land stretched forever and hope seemed to blow away with the prairie wind. Her father, Noah Cartwright, was a rancher, once proud, now weary. He fought every day against drought, debt, and the slow collapse of the small homestead they called home. Their cattle were thin, their water scarce, and their larder emptier with each passing season. 2 winters ago, Lily's mother had taken sick with fever and never recovered. Since then, their house had fallen silent, save for the occasional creak of the wind against the shutters. Her father had grown distant, burying himself in his work, while Lily buried herself in the worn pages of old storybooks, her only companions in a life that stretched out in aching quiet. The ranch was 2 days' ride from Fort Bryer, but the fort was little more than a way station, half soldiers, half townsfolk, all of them armed and suspicious. When news of the skirmish came, a bloody clash between settlers and a Comanche raiding party, most folks shrugged it off as the way of things, until they dragged in the survivor, a child. The Comanche girl was the sole one left breathing after the dust settled. No family, no tribe, no name. The soldiers called her the war pup. The settlers called her worse. "She's feral," Lily heard them whisper. "She'll slit your throat as you sleep. She's demon spawn. Should have been left for the vultures." But when Lily's eyes found the girls across the yard, past the leering men and the smoking campfires, she didn't see a monster. She saw someone who had lost everything, someone who had nowhere else to go. The girl in the pen, whom they would later know as Kaya, did not speak. The soldiers tossed her food, stale bread, bits of tough meat. She ignored it until starvation pressed too sharp to resist. Even then, she tore into it like an animal, eyes darting, hands never letting go of the half-eaten piece until she'd devoured the last crumb. The water tins sat in the corner of the pen. She drank sparingly, only when the midday sun set her throat aflame. When soldiers approached, she bared her teeth. Sometimes she lunged, quick as a rattlesnake, startling even the most seasoned among them. The younger recruits thought it was sport to provoke her. They jabbed at her with sticks through the slats, tossed stones to see her flinch. Once, she caught a stick midair and snapped it in two, her glare so cold. The boy who taunted her turned pale and backed away. Lily's father forbade her from going near the pen. "She's not your kind," he warned one evening, as they loaded sacks of dry grain onto their wagon. That wildness in her. Don't think you can fix it with kindness. But Lily didn't listen. Something gnawed at her insides when she thought of the girl, caged, starving, treated like less than an animal. So one evening, as the sky bled pink and orange over the fort, Lily slipped from her father's side, a scrap of cornbread folded in a cloth clutched in her palm. She approached the pen slowly, cautious but determined. Kaya's eyes, sharp as flint, fixed on her. Lily knelt, heart pounding, and gently pushed the bread through the slats. Kaya didn't move at first, but then, quick as a blink, she snatched it, tearing into the bread without looking away from Lily's face. They didn't speak. Neither of them needed to. The next night, Lily returned. This time, she brought a bruised apple. The girl took it with the same guarded hunger. They repeated this silent exchange each evening, Lily's careful offerings slowly melting a thin layer of ice between them. But peace on the frontier is as fragile as spring frost. One night, when the moon hung low and the fort's fires crackled lazily, a shadow slipped past the sentry. Caleb Rollins, son of a nearby rancher, stumbled drunkenly toward the pen, his boots kicking up little clouds of dust. 3 of his friends followed, their breath thick with whiskey and their laughter sour. Caleb had heard the stories, how the wild girl had mauled a soldier who'd tried to pull her from the pen. "I'll show y'all how to break a savage," he slurred, fumbling with the latch. Lily, hiding nearby, her arms wrapped around her knees, froze in horror as the wooden door creaked open. Caleb stepped inside, his shadow falling over Kaya. The girl hissed, backing against the fence, her hands balling into fists. Caleb lunged, seizing her by the arm and yanking her upright, his fist raised to strike. But Kaya didn't cower. A snarl tore from her throat, and she clamped her teeth down on Caleb's ear, hard and fast. He howled, the sound shrill enough to rattle the posts. Kaya didn't let go. Blood poured down his neck, staining her chin, but still she held on, wild and relentless. His friends, now sober with panic, shouted for help. The fort guards arrived, rifles raised. It took 2 men to pry her off him. Caleb collapsed, clutching the shredded mess of his ear, cursing and spitting, his friends dragging him away. The next morning, the fort commander posted a notice. The Comanche girl will be transported to the reservation at dawn. But everyone knew what that meant. She would not survive the journey, and perhaps that was the plan all along. That evening, when the fort quieted and the soldiers drifted to their quarters, Lily returned to the pen. Kaya sat slumped in the corner, her lips split, new bruises blooming along her jaw. Her wrists were bound tighter now, a cruel punishment. But her eyes, they weren't blazing with rage anymore. They looked tired, empty, as if some part of her had slipped away. Lily knelt by the fence, silent tears streaking her cheeks. She pressed her hand through the gap, palm open, trembling. She didn't know what she was offering. Maybe comfort, maybe forgiveness, maybe just a chance. Kaya stared at the outstretched hand, her own bound hands lying limp in her lap. Seconds passed like hours. Then, slowly, her rough, trembling fingers rose to meet Lily's. Their hands touched. The weight of that moment settled between them like a secret, fragile and powerful. No words passed between them. They didn't need words. In that quiet moment, the feral girl wasn't a savage, wasn't a demon, wasn't an enemy. She was just a child, terrified, alone, and maybe, just maybe no longer alone. The night Fort Briar fell to chaos. The sky burned orange against the black horizon. Smoke coiled over the rooftops as flames licked at the wooden barracks, and the crack of gunfire snapped through the still air. Bandits, dressed as ranchers, rode in under the guise of trade, only to draw pistols and knives, turning the fort into a den of panic. They weren't here for cattle or dry goods. They wanted rifles, ammunition, horses. In the bedlam, soldiers scrambled, townsfolk screamed, and shadows darted between buildings like phantoms. Inside the holding pen, Kaya felt the earth shake beneath her bare feet as horses thundered past. The chains at her wrists clattered as she tugged against them, heart pounding, watching through the slats as the world outside fractured into violence. A bandit, face half-shrouded with a kerchief, stumbled near the pen. His belt carried a long hunting knife. His keys jingled on his hip. Kaya's eyes narrowed. When he reached through the slats, rifling for supplies hidden by the soldiers, Kaya struck, quick as a viper, snatching the keys and vanishing into the shadows of the pen. Her hands trembled as she forced the lock open. The chains fell to the ground with a soft clatter. She could have run. No one would have stopped her. The desert night yawned wide and empty beyond the burning fort. Freedom was there for the taking. But then, a scream. Lily. Kaya's sharp eyes snapped to the source. Amid the chaos, Lily had been separated from the townsfolk, cornered by a looter with a knife drawn, his face twisted with drunken rage. The man shoved Lily hard against the fence, the blade flashing in the firelight. Kaya didn't think. Her legs moved on instinct, swift and silent as a shadow. She slipped behind the looter, snatched the knife from his hand, and with one precise, brutal motion, slammed the hilt into his temple. He collapsed like a rag doll. Lily gasped, wide-eyed, her chest heaving. Kaya grabbed her wrist. "Run!" Kaya hissed. And together, they vanished into the desert night, firelight at their backs, the stars cold and watchful above. The desert was no place for softness. 3 days into their flight, Lily understood that. The sun blistered overhead by day, and the cold gnawed at their bones by night. Sand clung to her skin like salt, her lips cracked and bleeding from thirst, her feet raw inside her thin leather boots. Kaya moved through the wilderness like a ghost, sure-footed, silent, as if the cacti and thornbrush made way for her. Lily stumbled, weak, trailing behind, every step a battle. They hadn't spoken since the night they fled, but actions spoke louder. Kaya found a prickly pear cactus and sliced it open, offering the cool, bitter water inside to Lily. She dug up tubers and wild onions, setting them to roast over a meager fire of sagebrush. At night, they shared a single threadbare blanket, huddling together for warmth beneath the endless sky. Their survival was fragile, stitched together by silent gestures and necessity. On the 4th day, a rattlesnake coiled beneath the rock where Lily sat, its tail twitching, the soft, menacing rattle slicing the air. Lily froze. The serpent struck, but Kaya moved faster. Her hand shot out, seizing the snake just behind its venomous head. With swift precision, she snapped its neck, tossing the limp body aside. Lily collapsed to the sand, breath ragged, eyes wide. You saved me," she whispered, voice cracking with exhaustion and disbelief. Kaya only shrugged, skin glistening with sweat, her sharp eyes scanning the ridgeline. "We need to keep moving," Kaya muttered, voice low but steady. The words were rough, her English fractured, but the meaning was clear. Danger wasn't behind them anymore. It was everywhere. By the time the desert bled into jagged canyons and twisted scrubland, both girls were spent. Physically, mentally, spiritually. It was near Red Hollow, a stretch of sandstone cliffs, where they found him. Or rather, he found them. A shadow on horseback, tall, lean, weathered like old leather, eyes hidden beneath the brim of a battered hat, his rifle slung low across his back, his expression unreadable. Cutter, they would learn his name, was a former army scout turned drifter, with scars along his arms and the quiet, watchful patience of a predator. The moment his eyes landed on Kaya, his face darkened. "Comanche?" he asked, spitting the word like a challenge. Kaya's grip tightened on the hunting knife she'd kept from the looter, but Cutter didn't raise his rifle. Not yet. Lily stepped forward, her voice hoarse but steady. "Please, we need water. We've got nowhere else." For a long moment, Cutter weighed them, gaze flicking between their ragged clothes, the dirt smudges, the blood stains. Finally, he sighed, dismounted, and tossed them a canteen. "Best you two stay hidden," he muttered. "There's men scouring these hills for a Comanche girl." Kaya stiffened. Cutter's eyes drifted to the thin cord at Kaya's neck, the edge of a carved pendant peeking beneath her tunic. Recognition flickered across his face. "I know that mark," he said darkly. The pendant wasn't mere jewelry. It was a ceremonial emblem, one that once belonged to a respected Comanche chief. "Your father," Cutter stated, "was Tahuran, wasn't he?" Kaya's silence was answer enough. Cutter spat into the sand. "You ain't just a runaway. You're a bargaining chip." Lily frowned. "What do you mean?" Cutter explained. Tahuran had been more than a chief. He was a leader of peace councils, a voice that could have brokered fragile truces between settlers and Comanche. But with his death, those hopes had burned away. Now Kaya, his only living child, held value. To some, a symbol of peace. To others, a pawn in the endless, bloody chess game of the frontier. Bounty hunters, soldiers, politicians, they all wanted her, alive or dead. That night, the campfire crackled low between them. Cutter sat apart, cleaning his rifle, always watching. Lily and Kaya huddled together beneath the thin blanket, exhaustion heavy in their limbs. For the first time, Kaya didn't flinch when Lily offered the canteen. Their fingers brushed. A tentative, tired smile crept onto Kaya's lips. Lily returned it, beneath the vast, star-dusted sky, surrounded by wolves, both the four-legged and two-legged kind. The girls weren't alone anymore. They weren't enemies. They weren't strangers. They were survivors. And whatever came next, they'd face it together. The wind carried dust like ash across the clearing as dusk settled over Cutter's cabin, tucked into the jagged hills of Red Hollow. Inside, Kaya sat sharpening a blade by firelight. Lily dozed beside her, finally asleep after days of running. Cutter cleaned his rifle on the porch, eyes never straying from the ridgeline. But even Cutter didn't hear them coming. The first bullet shattered the window. Glass exploded. The fire snapped. Cutter cursed, diving for cover as bounty hunters emerged from the treeline. 5, maybe 6, riding hard, rifles drawn, faces obscured by kerchiefs and shadows. Kaya yanked Lily to the floor as bullets punched through the cabin walls. "Get to the back." Cutter shouted, blood already staining his side from the first shot. They scrambled through the small, crooked cabin. Kaya steady, controlled, as though born into chaos. Her eyes burned with fierce purpose. Outside, the gunfight raged. Bullets ripped through wood, and smoke choked the air. Cutter fired from the porch, dropping one of the hunters. But they kept coming. As Cutter staggered, bleeding, Kaya slipped into the shadows, silent as a desert fox. Her small frame moved through the brush, bow in hand, blade strapped at her hip. The hunters didn't see her until it was too late. From the trees, arrows hissed through the air, deadly, precise. One hunter fell clutching his throat. Another stumbled back, the shaft buried deep in his chest. But as Kaya circled behind the last of them, she froze. A knife pressed against Lily's throat. The final hunter, a broad, sneering man with snake tattoos winding up his neck, held her tight, his eyes wild. "Easy now," he sneered, blade glinting against Lily's pale skin. "One wrong move, and I'll paint the dirt with her." Kaya's grip tightened on her bow. Her pulse roared in her ears. She could kill him. She wanted to. Every inch of her screamed for it. The wild, fierce part of her they all feared. But Lily's wide, terrified eyes found hers, the same eyes that had reached through the fence, the same eyes that had whispered, "You're not alone." Kaya hesitated. The hunter's knife pressed closer. "She's not worth dying for," he taunted. "You're just a filthy half-breed stray. Let it go." Kaya's jaw clenched. The desert wind stirred the ash in her hair. For a moment, the wild, feral rage surged within her. The same fury that made townsfolk call her savage, that made soldiers flinch at her stare. But then, Lily's hand moved. Shaking, trembling, she reached for Kaya, not in fear, in trust. Her fingers brushed Kaya's, small, fragile, yet defiant. Kaya's breathing slowed. The fire inside her didn't dim, but it shifted. It focused. In one smooth motion, Kaya lowered her blade, not in surrender, but in control. The hunter sneered, mistaking restraint for weakness. And that mistake cost him. Kaya feinted, lunging, not to kill, but to disarm. Her elbow smashed into his wrist. The knife clattered to the dirt. Her foot swept his legs from under him. The hunter hit the ground hard. Before he could react, Kaya's blade pressed to his throat, paused, then withdrew. She let him live. Lily collapsed into her arms, breath shuddering. The hunter scrambled back, dazed, clutching his bruised jaw as he stumbled into the shadows, vanishing into the night. Kaya's choice was clear, ferocity tempered by mercy. For the first time, the rage hadn't owned her. She owned it. The aftermath was quiet. The fire in Cutter's hearth smoldered low. Blood dried black along his shirt, but the old scout would live. Lily huddled near him, her hands bandaged, her face pale but determined. Kaya stood apart, the silver pendant heavy in her palm, the emblem of her father, of the tribe, of expectations she never asked for. Cutter stirred, voice rough with pain. "That mark, folks'll hunt you for it. They'll use you. You ready for that?" Kaya's gaze drifted to Lily, to the bruises fading from her wrists, to the quiet strength behind her blue eyes. "No," Kaya said softly. She walked to Cutter, handed him the pendant. "Bury it," she whispered. "I'm not their pawn, not their symbol, just Kaya." Cutter nodded, tucking the pendant into his coat. The three of them stood in the doorway as the sky blushed with morning light. "I know a place," Cutter offered. "North, past the broken hills. Settlement takes in runaways. Settlers, Comanche, doesn't matter. You could start fresh." Lily looked to her father's old ranch in the distance. Dusty small, filled with fear and narrow minds. She shook her head. "That's not my home anymore," she whispered. Kaya smiled, small, tired, but real. Together, they saddled the horses. Two girls, one scarred old scout, outcasts bound by choice, not blood. As they rode toward the distant mountains, the desert stretched wide around them. Broken but free. They called her feral, said she was born of hate and war. But they were wrong. The camera lingers on Kaya and Lily riding side by side, silhouettes against the gold and crimson sky. She was born of fire, and when she took my hand, we burned the past to ash. The screen fades to black. Text appears. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell us, what would you have done if the world called your friend the enemy? Soft music fades in as the final image holds. Kaya and Lily, two shadows against the sunrise, riding toward a future they chose for themselves.